Right now on Upfront.
Detained in North Korea.
I just want my son back. Get my son home.
A Wisconsin soldier, U.S. officials say willingly crossing into North Korea. Now the diplomatic crisis.
But we remain engaged in this matter, and it is a priority for us to seek his safe return.
Our guest this Sunday, Pentagon spokeswoman Sabrina Singh. The latest on the high-stakes showdown as a Wisconsin family pleads for his return. Then ABC News reporter Louis Martinez, the latest reporting from the Pentagon. Countdown to debate day.
And I think that he should be on that debate stage. I've never known him to be scared of anything.
1 month until the first Republican primary debate in Milwaukee. Who's likely in and who's out? The frontrunner, former President Donald Trump, facing another potential federal indictment.
If you say something about an election, they want to put you in jail for the rest of your life. It's a disgrace.
The latest on what we know, the Wisconsin election officials interviewed by federal officials, and what's to come in the week ahead. ABC News political director Rick Klein is here with it all.
This is Upfront with Jaron Jordan and political director Matt Smith.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Growing concern from U.S. intelligence officials this weekend. Pentagon spokeswoman Sabrina Singh standing by. Now nearly a week since the Wisconsin soldier Private Travis King willingly crossed the border into North Korea. U.S. officials working this weekend to determine the exact whereabouts and well-being of Travis King, the 23-year-old U.S. Army private second class from southern Wisconsin, who officials say willingly fled across the border into North Korea. King attended and graduated from Racine's Park High School in 2020. U.S. officials say he had just been released from a South Korean detention facility after being involved in a fight with locals in South Korea. Officials saying King was supposed to board a return flight to Fort Bliss, Texas, to face potential discharge when he left the airport, joined a tour of the DMZ, then willingly crossed the border.
He's a good young man. Nobody ever expected this out of him. He's a good young man. He's always been solid, family man.
King's family in Racine pleading for his return.
I just want my son back. Get my son home. Get my son home. And pray that he comes back.
She hopes they're in the process of doing this right now. That's all she really wants.
What is the latest you've heard?
I have nothing to say right now.
We're going to see how this all plays out and how it goes, because it's all out of our control. And that's when,
It's in their hands.
if he makes it out, then he can speak for himself. You know, we don't want to be the voice of him.
Before you go, is there anything you want people to know about your brother?
I mean, there's nothing that we're going to say that's going to change anybody's opinion that they already have on my brother.
Let's bring in Sabrina Singh, Deputy Press Secretary at the Pentagon. Sabrina, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You announced a few days ago the U.S. Army launching a counterintelligence investigation. Bring us up to speed. What is the latest on where everything stands?
Well, the Army is going to lead in the investigation into what exactly happened and why Private King did decide to leave and go into the DPRK. That's something that the Army will conduct, and we'll let them conduct that investigation in the timeline that they see fit. Our priority focus here at the Pentagon is to bring Private King home. We are working all levers of government right now to see if we can reach out to the North Koreans to see if there's any engagement that they will be interested in communicating with us. So far, we have not received a response from them, but we continue to keep up the hope.
So no communication back from North Koreans at this point?
There has not been any communication back from the North Koreans. Again, we continue to engage both from the DoD level, from the State Department level, the NSC level. This is a really whole of government approach and an interagency effort. Our priority is to bring Private King home. We are thinking of his family. I know this must be a very difficult situation for his family to be in right now. And our priority remains to bring him home as safely and as quickly as possible.
At this moment, what is the greatest fear among Pentagon officials?
Well, you know, that's really tough to say, and I wouldn't want to get into hypotheticals. Again, our hope is that we continue to keep up the pressure, keep engaging where we can with the North Koreans. Here are calls for them to engage with us. Our priority remains to bring Private King home, and so whatever we can do to make that possible, we're going to try and do.
Do Pentagon officials at this moment have concrete evidence that Private King is still alive?
You know, All I can tell you is that we know that the DPRK has Private King in custody. In terms of his whereabouts, in terms of his health, I'm just not sure. We can't speak to that right now.
Sabrina, as you know, there have been some reports indicating King may have pre-planned this. Is there any concrete evidence to that at this moment?
You know, I don't want to get ahead of the investigation, and I certainly wouldn't want to jump to conclusions. What I can say is that, again, our priority focus here from the very top levels of the Pentagon is to bring Private King home. I would let the investigation take its course and find out and reveal anything else that we didn't know in advance, but I think it's too early to speculate on that right now.
There's been some attention on the airport and how he got to the border. You said military officials brought him to the airport and that they couldn't go past security. The broader question I think some people are asking is, how did he manage to leave the airport?
Well, that's something that we are very interested in also finding out for ourselves. He was booked on a commercial flight home, but you have to remember is that he was not in custody. He was returning from a rotation overseas and going back to his home base, and he was returning to Fort Bliss. And so, again, when he was escorted to the airport, he got all the way up to the gate, as far as we understand, and he confirmed that he was at the gate. But in terms of why he left the airport, his whereabouts after, that's something that the investigation is going to really look into and figure out what exactly happened during that time frame.
At this moment, were all military policies followed in terms of officials who brought him to the airport?
We have no reason to believe that the process did not follow how the process should. Again, Private King was not in custody. He was returning from one duty station and going back home to Fort Bliss, where is his home duty station. So we believe that the proper protocols were followed. But again, that is something that the investigation will determine to see if anything or any additional steps should have been taken. But at the moment, we feel confident in how the process worked in terms of getting him to the airport and making sure that he was able to go through security.
What type of contact has been made with Private King's family here in Wisconsin? Any interviews ongoing at this point?
Well, I would defer to the Army. That is the Private King service, and so the Army is the lead in terms of contacting with the family. So, unfortunately, I'm not going to speak to those communications. These are, private, very serious communications that, if the family wants to disclose that, then we would be fine with that. But I would really refer you to the Army to speak more about what their communications are like with the family.
A quickly developing situation. Sabrina Singh, Deputy Press Secretary at the Pentagon. Sabrina, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
2 U.S. officials told ABC News King spent about a week under observation at a military base in South Korea before officially being released from jail. Officials say once King crossed into North Korea, he was taken away in a van believed to be taken to North Korea's capital, Pyongyang. Louis Martinez is ABC News senior Pentagon reporter. He joins us from Washington. Louis, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Matt.
Let's begin with right now where all of this stands. You spent years covering the Pentagon. What stands out to you most in terms of what we know and I guess more importantly, what we don't know at this moment?
Matt, I think the big question that other reporters here at the Pentagon are asking is how could this happen? We know that he was being escorted from his base to the airport, and then from there he's going to catch a plane back to the U.S., eventually taking him back to Fort Bliss. But the reality is that after he was dropped off at the security gate and the customs area, he was on his own inside that terminal. And I think at that point, it becomes a matter of trust. The Army did not know that he was missing until the plane eventually landed back in the United States, and he was not aboard. At that point, they started trying to figure out where he was. So I think one of the things they're looking at is how could this happen? Is that going to continue on in the future? But I think one of the things that is most important is trying to figure out what his state is, because as of right now, North Korea has not responded to inquiries from the United States about his status. And so they have nothing to go on. One of the big questions we're all asking is his motivation. And unless you actually get to talk to him, you're never going to figure that out for real.
I was going to say, to that second point, at this point, how much do Pentagon officials know that they're not revealing publicly? Or is this honestly a case where U.S. officials don't know where he is at the moment?
Well, what we have heard from a U.S. official is that he is currently in Pyongyang, that's North Korea's capital, and that he is under interrogation. That is what we understand. But beyond that, it's really unclear exactly what his state of mind is, what his motivations are.
I was going to say there has been some speculation that he may have defected, willingly crossing the border. What are sources telling you about that? Is that just unknown at this point?
Well, I think it's the whole pattern between the time that he disappeared at the airport to when he appeared at the DMZ. What we know is that there was about a 12-hour gap between that times. There have been some indications that he may have actually purchased this ticket way before he ever got to that airport, and it gets again to premeditation. So one of the things that they're looking at is exactly how long he was planning this, and whether he is in fact a defector. We don't know. Well, all that we can truthfully say at this point is that he willfully crossed into North Korea. And we know that because once he got up there at Panmunjom to that peace village, he just made a dash for that low brick wall where he just jumped over, ran across into the area, and was eventually nabbed by North Korean authorities, who then placed him into that van that we just described.
Private King is from Racine, Wisconsin, here in southeast Wisconsin. His family has talked very briefly, not much publicly. How much are U.S. officials trying to talk to family members at this point here in Wisconsin?
Sure. We can assume that there is a liaison with the family. We know that the Army Secretary had mentioned that there were some contacts made with the family, and that's to be expected, actually, in a situation like this. This is an international situation now, but the family, I think, is probably taking the prudent choice right now of laying low and essentially trying to ensure that the diplomats and anybody else who's involved in this situation can try to resolve it, because it's unclear how long this is going to go for.
Louis Martinez, ABC News Chief Pentagon reporter. Louis, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Matt.
Coming up, Indictment Watch. Federal prosecutors signal another looming indictment targeting former President Donald Trump, now just 1 month from the first Republican primary debate in Milwaukee. All the latest on who's likely in and who's out next.